Lord of the Mysteries. Chapter 997. Gambling God Dwayne. The core rules of Texas Hold'em were very simple. It was to use 2 whole cards and 5 community cards to form a hand with any 5-card combination. Whoever had the biggest hand won. And the community cards were dealt in 3 phases. 3 community cards to form the flop in the first phase, a 4th community card called the turn in the second phase, and a 5th community card called the river in the third phase. Each phase allowed players to fold, check, call, or raise. This continued until everyone was done or until one person didn't fold. Klein fiddled with the chip in his hand as he divined the existence of any lucky instances within the next few rounds. However, he was unable to tell which exact round it was. After all, it was only a quick and simple divination with average effects. Using this method to play with ordinary people and low-sequence beyonders wouldn't be a problem as long as the correct strategy is used, but it's definitely inadequate against demigods. It's already quite a challenge to defeat a mid-sequence beyonder. Must I close my eyes each round and do a complete dream divination? Heh, if that were the case, Dwayne Dantes might end up with the title Sleeping Gambling God. Klein sighed inwardly. He continued watching the round play out as he sat by the side. At present, he had already lost a big blind, 1, and a small blind, 2, when it was his turn. At this moment, Klein noticed one point. The MI9 deputy director, Konas Kilgore, had lost £20 to Admiral Amirius. A successful bribe. Admiral Amirius should be able to tell that Konas is using his powers as a baron of corruption, but he might not know that this MI9 deputy director is a demigod. The next round will be interesting. Hee. Klein jolted to attention as the new round began. He didn't check his whole cards when the croupier handed him 2 new ones. Instead, he placed the metal chip he was playing with in his hand onto his whole card, taking on the stance of not planning to look at them. After 2 people folded, the stern and old-fashioned Amirius Revolt casually took a look at his whole cards. After counting £5 worth of chips, he threw it into the middle of the table, having raised the stakes without garnering any surprises. Another person folded as mocked called. Right on the heels of that, Konas Kilgore, who had an unyielding personality, raised the stakes, throwing out a total of £20. Calvin confirmed his whole cards once again before calling. After one last person folded, Dwayne Dantes didn't do an actual count. He grabbed a handful of chips and threw it out. The croupier who was in charge of counting the chips glanced at it before precisely announcing Dwayne's action. £20. Call. I thought it would be £50. From the looks of it, I'm still not very used to these chips. The white-sideburn Dwayne Dantes with an outstanding temperament said with a laugh. However, he didn't add on the additional £30. At this moment, no one made a move. It was Amirius Revolt's turn again. This admiral didn't even glance at the remaining players. Picking up 5 £10 chips, he threw them out. Another raise. He didn't show any perturbations in his emotions, acting as though he was ordering a cup of black tea. However, that indescribable sense of dominance, and the act of repeatedly raising the stakes pre-flop made the mood at the table freeze. Such situations often implied that Admiral Amirius had excellent whole cards. Perhaps they were a pair of aces or a pair of kings, or an ace and king. Mock decided to fold. Konas Kilgore rubbed his high-nosed bridge and glanced around with his dark blue eyes before saying, "Call." Colonel Calvin confirmed his cards again. After 10 seconds of hesitation, he chose to fold. Dwayne Dantes touched the metal chip on his 2 whole cards and smiled. Call. After a round of expressing their intentions, there were only 3 players for the round. Then, the croupier flipped the 3 community cards in the middle of the table for the flop. 2 spade suit, 9 heart suit, K spade suit dot. The person who was up first was Admiral Amirius Revolt. He leaned forward slightly and said in a domineering manner, £50. He had immediately raised the stakes to £50. Mocked, Calvin, and company, including those who weren't in the game, felt stifled for some baffling reason. Konas Kilgore trembled slightly, but he ultimately grabbed £50 and threw it out. Dwayne Dantes glanced at the deputy director of MI9. Completely unfazed by the pressure, he said with a smile, "Call." Upon hearing this, Calvin turned his head and nodded at Dwayne Dantes with his deep blue eyes that resembled a nighttime lake, indicating his approval. From his point of view, Admiral Amirius's domineering stance didn't affect a person who came to lose money. At this moment, the red-vested croupier revealed the fourth card, the turn. 9 spacesuit dot. There were 3 spades, increasing the chances of a flush tremendously. However, Admiral Amirius still didn't hesitate. He calmly pushed a stack of chips. £100. Konas Kilgore's fingers tapped on his whole cards, showing his lack of confidence. But ultimately, he chose to call. Dwayne Dantes glanced at this deputy director once again and maintained his warm smile. Call. At this point in time, he had yet to see his whole cards, making Calvin somewhat worried. He believed that such an act was going overboard, a clear act of throwing money away. It wasn't something Admiral Amirius, who was relatively conservative, might find acceptable. At this moment, the red-vested croupier revealed the final card, the river. 2 club suit dot. As such, the community cards took form. 2 spade suit, 9 heart suit, case spade suit, 9 spade suit, 2 club suit dot. £200. Admiral Amirius pushed a pile of metal chips in with an extremely domineering attitude. Konas Kilgore took a deep breath before pushing 2 stacks of chips. £500. This amount of money was half of his purported annual salary. Is he trying to bluff? Calvin and Mock exchanged looks, believing that Brigadier General Kilgore had made it too obvious, making it easy to see through him. One had to know that when playing Texas Hold'em, apart from doing risk management and probability calculations, it also involved psychological battles most of the time. Be it in terms of body language, expression, or the style used for raises, they made it easy to expose one's hidden cards. Of course, good players could also use these details to deliberately misdirect their opponents. Dwayne Dantes sized up Konas Kilgore before he laughed. Then, like the previous few times, he said, "Call." Amirius raised his hands, prepared to push all his remaining chips, to pressure his opponents into folding. At this moment, he suddenly paused. His deadpan expression wore a look of solemnity. After a few seconds of silence, he calmly said, "Call." At this point, the whole cards could be revealed to compare each person's hand. Admiral Amirius flipped his card first. It was an ace spade suit and 10 spade suit. It formed a flush with the 2 spade suit, case spade suit, and 9 spade suit. It was a rather high-ranking hand, with the only ones bigger than it being a full house, 4 of a kind, straight flush, and royal flush. "It's your turn," Amirius then urged Konas. Konas first flipped open a single card, K diamond suit. It made 2 pairs with the K and 9 from the community cards. Following that, he picked up his second whole card. At that moment, the remaining poker cards at the red-vested croupier's end blurred. Pa! The whole card was flipped open, revealing itself. 9 club suit! What? Mocked and company exclaimed, hardly believing their eyes. This meant that Konas Kilgore had obtained a full house, 9s over kings. It was bigger than a flush. Sorry about that. Full house. Konas looked at Amirius and said with a smile. Then, he turned to look at Dwayne Dantes. You can reveal your cards. I'm also very curious as to what my cards are. Dwayne Dantes smiled. He picked up the metal chip that he had placed down on his cards and very casually flipped the 2 whole cards. What? Calvin and company rubbed their eyes. Dwayne Dantes's whole cards were a very weak pair. 2 heart suit, 2 diamond suit dot. There happened to be a very small pair in the community cards. 2 spade suit, 2 club suit dot. They formed a 4 of a kind, the smallest rank when it came to 4 of a kind, but it was higher rank than all the full houses. Praise the lady! Dwayne Dantes drew the crimson moon across his chest in pleasant surprise, looking as though he had never expected it. An interesting round. Amirius was taken aback for a moment before he gently clapped. Kona's Kilgore gave Dwayne Dantes a deep look and said with a laughing sigh, "I never expected the final winner to be you." Klein wiped the smile from his face as he inwardly grumbled, "It's only right that I win over the two of you." On the one hand, Admiral Amirius enjoys pressuring others and doesn't really rely on his beyonder powers to cheat. As for you, you placed your focus and beyonder powers on Admiral Amirius, thus ignoring me. On the other hand, the one playing cards with you is actually named winner in any. Without even looking at his whole cards, it was obvious that he was relying solely on luck. At the moment he placed his chip on the whole cards, Klein had already swapped positions with Enemy as they switched faces with each other. Although Colonel Calvin had gotten him to deliberately lose £1,000, Klein decided to win a killing after he saw Kona's Kilgore. This wasn't because he couldn't bear to part with the money. Instead, his main motive was to garner the attention of this Mi-9 demigod. He wanted to get familiar with him and build relationships. Only by doing this could Klein have an opportunity to obtain intelligence from Kona's Kilgore, and even carry out an assault on him. After all, he was a demigod. To deal with him in Backland required sufficient care and caution. He would rather give up an operation if he lacked the confidence to guarantee a kill or lure him away from Backland. Otherwise, he was bound to expose himself, ending up being surrounded by demigods and even angels in Backland. In the subsequent rounds, Klein won and lost different rounds. In the end, not only did he keep his £1,000 in chips, but he had even won nearly an additional £1,000. During this process, Calvin had gestured to Dwayne Dantes to lose, but he was left stupefied by the latter's ridiculous good luck that left him undefeatable. After the game came to an end, a person walked over to Dwayne Dantes with a smile. "Kona's Kilgore. 1 big blind is equal to the minimum bet. 2, the small blind, is normally half the big blind.